it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about all the things that I got up to in January. So I'm going to be sharing with you a few memories from the last month, as well as talk in depth more about my tarot practice and the decks that I use in my different practices. So before we jump into the decks and the journals and all that kind of good stuff, let's talk real quick about a few memories. So I've pulled my little trusty planner out because actually my memory is not so good and I rely solely on my planner to keep me functional. If you want to find out more about my planner stuff and see how I put them all together and how I use them and whatnot, that, I actually have a whole nother channel for that. Which I will leave linked in the description box below for you. But what I thought we would do is just, rather than me trying to sit here and my way through memories, we're just gonna take a really quick little flip through my planner so that I can see what was memorable throughout the month. Okay, so I'm just taking a little quick flip through. I mean, most of the time it's like my usual thing. I've got work that I'm doing and whatnot. Lots of video recording, lots of working on my deck, stuff like that. I had some chat with some friends, which was great. I joined a Ching study group, which we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. And then I've been playing with some fiction writing as well. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of things throughout the month that has been helping me kind of get back into the flow of, right, after the whole holidays and the December, end of the year, beginning of the next, there's this whole trying to get back into the swing and the flow of things. And my planner is one of those things that helps me with that. But I also, kind of integrated some other things here and there, things that I don't normally do, like fiction writing, taking an entire day off, a legitimate entire day off. That's not something I actually do very often. So it's a nice little reminder that I do need to kind of do that kind of stuff. We had our monthly live with my members, which was so fun. It was 4 hours. It was great. We just all hung out and chatted. A bunch of people came on camera, and it's really just a giant hangout, which is so fun. Not giant as in number of people. It's a really wonderful little group of people, but giant as in it was 4 hours. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. So I did a live on Orshi's channel, which I will leave linked in the description box below for you. But we got together and chatted about fandom decks, and oh my goodness, that was so much fun. I had such a great time hanging out with Orshi, talking about all of our favorite fandom decks and everything. And yeah, it was so much fun. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I'll definitely link that in the description box below. That was definitely that's kind of funny as I'm sitting here kind of looking through my planner going, what was most memorable for me throughout the month of January? And it really was the lives that I participated in, which is really kind of outside my thing, right? I don't do lives in a general sense on my channel. Being able to connect with people and connect with other people in the tarot community, that's always my most favorite memory every single month. Hanging out with my members is always a treat. Being able to, show up on other people's channel and hang out with them and chat about all the things that we love, those are really the significant, memorable moments for me in any given month. So those are just kind of quick memories. Let's go ahead and jump into the decks that I worked with. Then we're going to take a little flip through my tarot journal, and I'm also going to show you another planner that I've incorporated into my practice, only because it does actually relate to what we talk about here on this channel. But again, if you want to see more, hear more about my planners and journaling in general, definitely go check out my other channel because I often post more about that kind of stuff there. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so we're gonna start things off talking about the decks I used for the monthly medicine practice, which is a guided tarot practice that I do with my members. Every single month we do a different topic, we have different prompts, and it's this really great fun thing that we get to do together. But it is also very much the foundation of my tarot practice, which is why most of the time when I start these videos, that is where I start, because those are the decks that I have worked with the most throughout the month. And I often switch up those decks for that practice. But in January, our practice was really focused on setting new intentions for the new year. And although I worked with quite a few decks this last month, I did end up just using really 2 decks mainly, these 2 decks, for my monthly medicine practice. So this is the Dreaming Way Tarot, and the reason I have 3 decks out here, even though, like I just said, I only use 2 decks, is because this is actually my trimmed version, and this is my Hedge Witch Botanical. And actually, now that I'm saying that, I did actually use one other deck at the start of the month, and that's only because that was a deck that I had used in some prep work for the month, and so it ended up getting integrated into the first week of monthly medicine. But after that, I pretty much was solely working with the Dreaming Way and the Hedge Witch Botanical. So like the Dreaming Way is like, it's just one of my favorite decks. I don't know, I've shared it a lot recently. Whoops, got a card upside down. Because it is, did I shuffle half my deck upside down? I hate when I do that. I need to pay more attention when I'm shuffling. Anyway, the Dreaming Way is just like, it's one of my favorite decks. It's like a really solid reader. It's a go-to for me. I love the world. Like aesthetically, like it's just totally like my vibe, right? My jam. And it's such a wonderful, practical reader for me. It is very Rider-Waite-Smith, so that's really cool. I do like that because like it's really, really easy to read. But the thing that I really love about this deck is like, it kind of slots in anywhere that I need it to slot into, which is really cool. And like I can use it for absolutely anything. So I do have 2 copies of this deck because, let's move this one out of the way. My original is here and I trimmed this one. So if you want to see the difference between the trimmed and untrimmed, this is my first copy that I've had forever and ever, and I did trim it. Now this I trimmed before I started using the whole like ruler system with like, you know, making sure that I'm actually cutting things like at the same width and height every time. And so it doesn't like, it's not great, which means it doesn't shuffle really well. I don't know if you can see, but it's like, you see wherever there's ridges, that's where cards are quite a bit taller than the others, like quite a bit. And so it gets this really clunky shuffle because this was back in the time when I would just like basically cut a card all the way around and then move on to the next card before I discovered my little method. And like when I go to shuffle this, it's like super clunky. And you can see it chunks up really bad. So like the more I was using it throughout the month, because it was my main deck for January, like if I had to save like the one tarot that was my main tarot deck that I used, it would definitely be this one. I was kind of getting frustrated with that clunky shuffle, especially when I was using it like alongside this deck, which shuffles beautifully. It's a little Llewellyn Oracle deck. And so I was like, I'm just gonna order another one. And I was thinking originally about trimming this one down too and just like doing a proper trim. I could certainly retrim this. To fix it, I would only need to trim one of each side. So I would need to trim the top at the same measurement and one of the sides, and that would actually fix it. So it would be a pretty quick and easy trim. I would have to re-edge the whole thing, but like it's already pretty small, and I was like, do I really want to go through that effort of trying to fix it? I really didn't. So what I ended up doing was just ordering another copy of the Dreaming Way. I was like, I'll go ahead and trim it. And then when I was talking about it with my members, I was like, you know what? I actually kind of like the borders. So, you know, we were talking about, should I leave them? Should I cut them? And like the consensus was pretty much, you know, what I was thinking, which was just like leave it. And then I have 2 copies. So I have like no intentions of rehoming my trimmed one. I may at some point like even fix the trim so that it does shuffle a little bit better. But like compared to this, and this is, like US Games cardstock, which isn't always my favorite. It's kind of thick, but it does break in eventually, and that's just such a nicer shuffle. I mean, it's not like a Llewellyn shuffle, right? I mean, in my opinion, like you just can't beat a Llewellyn shuffle unless you're gonna go like some of the really nice linen indie decks. I'll show you one here in a minute where I'm like, that's the best shuffle. So I ended up with 2 copies of this deck, which is totally fine. I'm apparently a little bit out of practice of doing this whole thing. I absolutely love these two decks together. I think I've talked about it, shared this pairing in many different occasions and on many different videos. It is one of my favorites, and it's definitely a go-to that I like to work with quite frequently when I am using the Dreaming Way Tarot. Now, it's the Hedwig Botanical is not like the only oracle deck I will use with it, but it works really, really well. So I love the white space. I feel like the white space really brings a bit of breathing room and really frames the messages in the Dreaming Way really beautifully. And they just seem to kind of exist in this really cohesive, beautiful world where the Hedwig Botanical is really giving me that foundational focal point message that I need. And then it's, you know, the Dreaming Way, the tarot is pulling that message out even deeper, which is phenomenal. And I absolutely love that. I also love the pops of color. And I think I mentioned this in a video earlier in January where like sometimes it'll be the color, that one pop of color in the Hedwig Botanical that will draw my eye, and I'll look for it in the other cards. And in this case, like maybe I'll look and see it's not like significantly represented in either one of these, either this Page of Swords or this Four of Pentacles. So that might be something there, because sometimes the lack of something in a reading can have just as much significance and importance as what is there. So like if you do a big reading and you're like, you know, you've got all the suits except one, that might be something to look at and to key into, which I just think is really cool. You know, sometimes what isn't there is just as important as what is. And so I really enjoy that about the Hedwig Botanical, that it does allow me to do that. Like it's such a simple, solid, wonderful reader. And I don't need the guidebook, but actually because of the work that we were doing in January, because we were focusing primarily on the Oracle deck, I did end up getting into the guidebook for this. So like I have it here as well. And it's just a lovely little guidebook. I really enjoy the messages. There is a lot about the plant itself in here, but I ended up kind of just mostly skimming toward the sort of oracle message. And then you'll see when we get to my tarot journal, like I wrote that a lot in there. The only thing that this book is missing, in my opinion, is like an actual index that includes the card names. So like there's no list of the cards. And so that can be a little bit frustrating when you're working with it. Because like you have to literally flip through the book to find. I mean, they are in alphabetical order and that helps, but like you do have to flip through the book in order to find the plant that you're looking for. But I really do love the book. I love the messages that are in it. And I don't often work with this guidebook with that Oracle deck. So it was really cool to be able to dive into it and to kind of reconnect with it again in that way. So I really did enjoy that practice. Now, I also used briefly the Flora Healing restoration cards, and I've got my, which I need to pull out. This is my card for the year. So the entire year of 2023, my card is Dandelion and my keyword is become. You'll see that later on in my other planner. So I wanted to make sure I pulled that one out. But this little deck is so cool because like, and it's got like the best shuffle. I'm going to shuffle it here in a moment, but we'll do a little quick flip through. Again, like the Hedwig Botanical, like it's really soft, simple illustrations. There is a bit more color on this particular deck. But one of the things that I do like is that it has the messages right on the back. And these messages are fantastic. I'm actually using this deck in several different ways throughout 2023. So you'll be seeing it again come up because it's like sitting in my main bin of decks that I'm working with. But it does work really well with the Dreaming Way. Again, we're looking at, you know, that kind of white space. It's got a little bit of a little bit more of a vintagey kind of aesthetic than say the Dreaming Way does. And it's a little less stark, I think, in a comparison to, you know, the Hedwig Botanical. It's just got a little bit of a softer feel to it, a little bit of a softer energy. And so when I want to kind of have that white space but not get so locked into that kind of stark white energy that can feel a little bit cold, sometimes I'll use this deck instead because it's just a little bit softer. It's a little bit sweeter. It's got a little bit of a different energy to it than the Hedge Witch Botanical does, even though they're both essentially botanical decks with a lot of white space around them. Let me just real quick, in case you are unfamiliar, this creator has 3 of these decks, the Flora, the Fauna, and the Fantastic Beings, and they are on this like watercolor paper cardstock, which just is like my absolute favorite to shuffle. There are times when I just get these decks out and we'll shuffle them and pull a card just for like a mindful moment. Let's see what our card is. What did we get? Hydrangea with Absorb. Absorbing and revealing is as customary as breathing, and yet we still have a choice. What elements in your life should you refrain from soaking up? If you employed choice, how might your disposition change and your outlook on life improve? I love it. I just think that's so cool. So that's definitely one of the decks that I was pairing with the Dreaming Way in the beginning of the year that I used for that first week, because again, the first card was tied into something else I'm doing. And then I had the Hedge Witch Botanical that I was using as my main focal oracle, and then my tried and true Dreaming Way Tarot. That was my main working deck for the month. I started the month off with my trimmed version, and then as soon as I got this one, I switched to my sort of original bordered version. So the next deck and practice that I engaged with throughout January is my Simple Sunday spread. So that's a spread that I do in my public Facebook group. I'll have a link. I think there's always a link to that in the description box of my videos. But every Sunday I post just a simple 3-card reading that is just kind of offers us a moment to connect with our cards and to do a little bit of reflective journaling. So for this month, for January, I was working with my Future Ancestor Tarot, which is one of my absolute favorite decks. I really enjoy the artwork in this deck. I really enjoy the messages. I do find it to be most of the time very healing and supportive, but there are occasional times where this little deck can be a real butt kicker, like in a really good way, like telling me, okay, I know you want to hear like the super sweet message right now, but that's really not what you need, so I'm going to give it to you straight. And I really appreciate this deck's ability to be able to kind of traverse those two different energies of being able to deliver the hard truth of what is needed, but it does so in a really gentle and supportive way. So it's like somebody telling you it's gonna be okay, but like really you do need to get your crap together, right? The stuff isn't gonna fix itself. And I just really love that energy with this deck. But I do think that overall, like it's very nurturing and supportive and loving. It's definitely a deck that like in any given day I could pull out for just a really wonderful supportive message, but it really does not shy away from the hard things either. And I do really appreciate that about the deck. It has the ability to be both, and I just think that that's really, really wonderful. I also really love the artwork. It's again totally up my alley. It's totally my aesthetic. You know, it's black and white and gray and green, and clearly that like is a color that really resonates with me. Like my whole house is in that color palette, so it's really not surprising that this works for me. It's just a fantastic deck. I have edged mine in this like heather gray. Real quick before I share the book with you, like this is the deck I was talking about that has like the most amazing shuffle. That's perfection, in my opinion. The Llewellyn decks get really close, and I think if Llewellyn ever went to like a linen cardstock, this is what it would be like, which would be fantastic. But yeah, just a beautiful shuffle and a beautiful, beautiful deck. The other thing that I was working with alongside that is the new Future Ancestor Tarot Companion. Now, I reference the little pamphlet that comes with this deck like every time I use this deck. It doesn't matter if I like lay the cards down and I immediately know what is being conveyed to me through the messages there. Even if I know it, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, I still get into this little pamphlet to see what it has to say because I just absolutely love the messages of it. So when the creator reached out to ask if I would be interested in checking out the full-size guidebook. I was like, absolutely. So I was sent this by the creator, so in full transparency, and it is lovely. It is this beautiful kind of blend between a guidebook and a workbook. So there's lots of space for you to work through the deck and the cards with the book as well. And you can also just reference it and use it as a guidebook. Let me show you just a little bit here. So here's the Empress. We have a little bit about the Empress. There is full color versions of the cards, and then we have almost like, it feels like a poem right over here. It's a lovely little write-up about the energy of the card. There's a bit of oracle in there as well, and then there's usually some sort of activity or something that we can do to tap into that energy. There's also like some journaling. So here the Emperor has some journaling questions. So we have a ritual for judgment with some reflection affirmations after following the Judgment card. And then that is primarily for the majors. And then when we go into the minors, we have just the card and then like an little expanded message. Again, really concise and cohesive, and it works really, really beautifully. So I really, really enjoyed it. Clearly, I didn't write in it. When I get books like this, I don't write in them. I'll create a separate journal, or I'll just journal in a journal that I already have, because I want to be able to like do this more than once. I really enjoyed getting to know the full-size guidebook. I still, of course, dove into my little one, and then, of course, I was working with my cards. So every Sunday, I did the Simple Sunday reading. So next, I want to talk a little bit about the I Ching study that I'm doing with a small, lovely group of people. I don't want to go too far into like exactly what it is. We are only halfway through. We are doing a hexagram a day for the first, relatively 2 months of the year. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about just the things that I was using for that practice. And then we will go into, I'll talk a little bit more about it when I actually get to the sort of planner that relates to that. So let me just share with you a couple of the decks that I've been working with in that practice. So one of the main decks is this little, what we just call the study deck. Like, it has a name. I can't remember. I think it's just like the I Ching set or something. Again, I'll link it below for you. It's just a little cheapy deck that I picked up at Barnes & Noble. Like, I was just walking through, saw it in the clearance section, and picked up a couple copies. And what we've been using this one for is kind of like to get our main hexagram that we're going to be studying for the day. And then a lot of us are using, because on the back of the card, there's a little bit about it, but there's also some kind of questions for reflection. And we've been using those as discussion topics, as well as like to pull cards along with tarot. And I'll show you here in a moment the deck I've been using for that. So it's just a really simple, like, there's nothing fancy about it. It's just the hexagram, the number, and, some text and some information. So it does come with this little book here, which I did use quite a bit in the beginning. A lot of what's in this introductory in here is actually in my little study journal. And we're not going into the changing lines yet. We're still just learning the hexagrams, but a lot of what's in here in terms of like the different lines and the elemental associations and things like that, all of this I now pretty much have transferred into my journal. And to be perfectly honest, I haven't really referenced this since I kind of used it as my initial what the heck is going on within the I Ching. So it was really, really great for that. But like in a daily sense, I'm not actually engaging with this book anymore. So the primary book that I've actually been using is from the Visionary I Ching cards, because this little book is fantastic. We'll take a look at the cards too. All of my I Ching stuff is currently in order because I am studying it. I have been using this deck, which I do really, really love. Like the artwork is really, really beautiful, and I cannot wait to actually work with it. I did get it to work specifically with my Hardy Tarot because like it looks beautiful with that, and I've really been enjoying working with it in that way. I've been tempted because I'm in a study group and I get to see everybody else's fantastic I Ching related decks. I've been very, very tempted to get a few others, but I'm trying to like just focus on what I have for now before I add in yet another resource, because also in our study group, like we share resources and things that we're learning along the way. But this little book has been really, really cool. It has just what the kind of the hexagram is about, you know, what its associations are, you know, elementally, like this is fire above, thunder below. We have a little bit about the card, and then there's usually, you know, some sort of divinatory-esque message to it. Again, we're not getting into the changing lines yet because we're just doing this basic practice. But I've actually found this one to be the most approachable and the one that most succinctly kind of sums up the energy of the current hexagram that we're studying. So I've really enjoyed working with this one. It's been kind of foundational, and it's kind of creates the baseline for my studies for each I say card, but each hexagram every single day. So another deck that I've been using alongside the book, but I didn't pull the book out, is the Ching of the Goddess. Now this one, we have to reorder it because, and then there's several of us in the group that have this deck. It doesn't have, it doesn't follow the same exact structure in terms of which hexagrams fall where in like sort of the lineup, the progression. So like we've had to move things around. So like here's 1 and then 64 and then 30 and then 6. And that's totally fine. I really love the interpretations and the information that Barbara Walker includes in this deck and in the book. Sometimes it does depart quite drastically from what we are experiencing and learning in the current hexagram that we're working with, especially compared to like some of the other resources that we have access to. But like the whole goddess level energy of this is just like so spot on. And the whole reason I wanted to do an I Ching study in the first place was so that I could work with this deck and understand this deck. But because it does do its own thing, I felt it was really important to kind of at least have a basic understanding of the more traditional progression of the I Ching structure, I guess, so to speak. I'm still very much a newbie, so like everything is still very much new and I'm still very much learning. This deck is out of print, unfortunately, but it's like not, I don't think it's that difficult to find. I was able to pick up my copy on eBay for like, I don't know, $30 or something like that. Now the tarot deck that I've been using alongside that, because like I said, we had those little study cards with the questions on the back. And when we first started this, like I needed the tarot to kind of help me bring that energy into alignment with the rest of what I was doing. And so I pulled the tarot deck out, and this one just, like it just happened to be sitting in my cart. It just happened to be the one that I grabbed the first time that I was like, I need to pull cards around those questions because I'm kind of unsure about what they mean to me in this moment. So I ended up grabbing Tarot of the Holy Spectrum, which is a deck I think I mentioned in my decks I wanted to work with in 2023, I do believe. And I was like, I need to like, this deck might be too cool for me. I need to get to know it. The thing that I found with this deck is such a straight shooter. And I'm using it every single day, pulling cards in relation to those questions on the back of the little study deck. And this deck just so concisely calls me out on everything. And when I lay cards to answer those questions, like I immediately know what this deck is trying to tell me. So it's been a really interesting experience because when I first got this deck and I started looking through it, I was like, oh, this deck is like super cool, but I think like it's too cool for me. Like I'm just not this cool. I mean, and if you saw like my nerdy gamer video, right, y'all know now. The secret is out. I am not that cool. But I was a little bit intimidated is what I'm getting at. Like I was a little intimidated by this deck. And having used it in the way that I have been, working with it every single day, pulling cards to help understand and to relate those I Ching messages back into a language that I understand, because tarot is a language that I understand. So when I connect those two things in my brain, it makes sense because I can kind of figure out what's coming through by pulling the tarot to flesh out the message in a sense. Same way I use like Oracle, right? I'm just using the hexagram in that kind of foundational space, or the same as like I might use a rune. That's kind of like the anchor. And then I use tarot to kind of flesh that out. And like, I didn't know what to expect when I first threw these cards down around that practice deck, it was really just the deck I just grabbed at hand, and I was like, let's just rip off the Band-Aid, let's just do it. And ever since then, I have used it every single day to do those exercises and those questions. And this deck is just beautifully blunt, but not like, it's a little bit different than like a Barbara Walker energy or even like a Stunning Tarot energy, which I was kind of like, I didn't need this deck when I first saw it because I do have the Stunning Tarot, which I absolutely love. But those have a little bit of a sassy energy to them. And this one is just like blunt, to the point, unapologetic. It just is what it is. And like, either deal with it or don't and get on with your day, right? It does not care. This deck is completely ambivalent to whatever it is I'm thinking or feeling. And yes, sorry, I do totally personify my decks. I think I've mentioned that in several videos lately. And that's just the language that I use when I'm speaking about a deck. But it really doesn't care what I think or feel. It just tells me what I need to know and just like deal with it and move on. So I've really been enjoying it. I will say that like this deck did come like edged, or gilded, really. That's not really called gilding, it's just edged. It was edged in black. It has these amazing like matte black backs, which I absolutely love. It does really shuffle beautifully. It's standard tarot size, but it does feel just like, it's just the tiniest bit of a stretch for my hands, but it does give a really nice ripple. And it goes back together pretty well, but because I'm a riffle shuffler, like it is starting to chip already. However, with this being black, I could probably just touch it up with a marker. Anyway, I'm going to be planning to continue to use this deck in the same way that I have all throughout January, pulling cards every day alongside my I Ching study. I'm going to be doing that all through February too, until we wrap up the I Ching study practice. So I'll definitely be working with it again. I don't know if I'll show it again next month, we'll see. But it is definitely in my plans to continue to use that in very much the same way, because it's just working really, really well for me. And like, I like it a lot better than I really thought I was going to. So that's always a bonus. Real quick, let's just touch upon a deck that didn't work out for me. I definitely don't want to ever like talk bad or bash a deck, but I do think it is important to talk about those times when decks don't quite hit the way that we want them to. So this is the Phantom Wise Tarot. Now, I went on a whole journey with this deck. I made it a bag. I edged the entire deck in red, because if you've read the books, like red is a significant color in the book. That was like the first thing that I did as soon as I got it and opened it was edge this deck, really. And it looks beautiful and I love it, but this deck, and let me just point out to my members real quick, still on top. So what happened with this deck and the experience that I had was that, I'm going to be perfectly honest, it was kind of disappointment when I first opened the deck with my members, and I was looking through it for the first time, because I do a video called Coffee and Cards every month with my members, where it's basically anything that I've bought and has come into my collection, and we just sit and hang out and I open everything up and we look at it. And I did that, and there was this immediate kind of letdown, and it is a tactile thing for me with this deck. It is, it says it's linen, but it feels like corduroy. It sounds like corduroy, and I really have a tactile aversion to this deck. And I did from the moment I opened it and started playing with it. I also find that the sort of faux linen-y stamping that is on this deck, or whatever it is, whatever this texture is, makes the artwork look really, really muddled, and I have a really hard time seeing any sort of detail in the images. And it's just, I was so disappointed, like so disappointed, because I waited so long for this deck. I absolutely love the Night Circus. I love everything that creator does, or that author does. I've read several of her books now, and I so wanted to love this deck, and I just really didn't. And I think part of the problem was the tactile experience that I had when I first opened the deck. It was just this aversion. It doesn't feel good in the hand. It doesn't shuffle well. I do not like the sound it makes. To me, it's like corduroy swishing back and forth, which is not a sound that I enjoy. And I have trouble with seeing the artwork and the detail in the artwork. It just kind of looks fuzzy and muddled. And like, I mean, absolutely no disrespect to the deck creator or anything, because none of that is the creator's fault. In my opinion, this is a production issue, is the production quality of this deck that I do not care for. It also is doing this weird rocky thing that happens because it's got this weird, it's got a bow, but it's kind of got a weird, like almost half twisted bow thing going on. I know a lot of people who love this deck and work with this deck, and it works beautifully for them. So like, this is a very me thing, but because at the end of the day, these are tools that I use, and they have to work for me in a functional way, as well as being something that I enjoy hanging out with and playing with and, you know, doing my practice with and all that. But at the end of the day, like, it has to be a tool that physically works for me. And this just didn't. And I was actually really, really disappointed. I did finally do, like, I did a final reading again when I was doing a video for members, and like, I kept saying, this deck does not like me. Like, I feel like we don't get along. It doesn't like me. This is totally, of course, me personifying the deck, but it doesn't like me. And then I shuffled and I did a reading, and that's where it gave me like the Death card, the 10 of Swords, and whatever the other one was, which I said to members, like, let's see if it's still on top, because if it's still on top, it means I haven't touched the deck again. And I just haven't, and that's okay. Like, not every deck is gonna be for me, and that's totally all right. You know, I can appreciate where this deck's coming from. I can absolutely love everything else this writer does and not resonate with the deck. And I think that that's totally a valid experience, as well as, you know, talking about the decks that do work out for us. I mean, we always have to be respectful. This is somebody's hard work, somebody's passion, somebody's creative energy in this deck. And so I always want to be respectful of that. But in all honesty, it's also a tool too. And the tool doesn't work for me, even though I can appreciate everything else about it. So that was my experience with the Phantom Wise, which was really, really a heartbreaking experience for me, because I was so excited about it. And maybe my expectations were just too high, and it was just too high for the deck to try to aspire to. So it could be a totally me thing as well. So let's talk about another deck that I used in a daily practice. One of the practices that I kind of flow in and out of, I guess, is pulling a daily oracle card. I do only tend to do this like kind of Monday through Friday, because it sits with me at my working desk. And for whatever reason, I just felt called to pull Into the Lonely Woods into this practice for the month. And you'll see it actually reflected in my practice planner as well. I love this deck. This is like, I've mentioned it before, the characters in this deck make me think of Ludo from the Labyrinth movie. And so like, this is my Ludo deck, and that's its name. This is Ludo, and every little character in here just reminds me of that soft, sweet, supportive, gentle energy. It is a little sad sometimes. It's a little bit, you know, kind of melancholy. But I think because I had such, some of the other decks that I worked with were really kind of sharp and stark. The Tarot of a Holy Spectrum is pretty sharp. The Dreaming Way is not really sharp, but it can be a little bit like cut and dry. The Hedge Witch Botanical, like a lot of those white space decks, we're gonna look at a few more that I kind of dipped in and out of throughout the month. And I felt like I just kind of needed like just a little bit of softness there. And I really enjoyed pulling one of these cards basically every morning, Monday through Friday, for like to sit with me throughout my work day. I didn't get into the guidebook or anything. I just looked at it's really about the artwork, but I did take into account the message, and I wrote those down in my planner. But it was really just having these soft, cuddly, a little bit sad creatures hanging out with me, every day, all day long, all throughout the month. It was so cool. I have edged mine in green. A deck that I also played with throughout the month, which I'm gonna leave this one out here because I kind of want to show you what I was doing as well. So this month I was also playing with the Runic Tarot. And this one I think I shared in a couple of videos, at least one I can think of. I have edged mine in yellow. It came out way darker than I really wanted, but that's okay. Anyway, this was a deck that is fairly new to my collection, and I just I don't know, I just wanted to play with it. I wanted to experience it. And so it was a deck that I ended up just kind of pulling into readings here and there. But what I also did was I made sure that I did at least one reading with this deck a week. And then I tapped into the runic energy of it as well. And then occasionally I would pull a card and then cast runes around that. So I do have like my little rune set that I showed in my desk tour video that I did. These were the runes that I was using for that practice throughout the month. And like it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed connecting back into my rune work. I was kind of like a little bit, I guess, all over the place throughout the month of January because I was learning I Ching, I was doing tarot and oracle as usual, doing my monthly medicine, doing moon readings. I have another deck that I'm actually doing a daily study on as well too. And then on top of all that, I was pulling runes. So like January was just, it was a lot, but like I was energetic. I wanted to engage with all kinds of things. And I really felt like this did a really good job of kind of reconnecting me with that. I really enjoy this deck. I really enjoy the world it exists in. I really do like the imagery, the artwork. The guidebook is nice. They do reference the runes. Because I've done my own kind of personal intense study with the runes, Lisa and I did a rune group a while back. I don't remember how long ago it was, but where we sat and we like gathered and we researched and did a bunch of research and kind of cultivated through this group effort our own sort of understanding of the runes, pulling from all different resources and each other and everything. So I have a very kind of clear vision of what my personal interpretation of the runes are, and sometimes in the guidebook it didn't really align. Probably also because it's trying to relate back to the tarot as well. That's nothing against the guidebook or the author. It's just I did tend to kind of fall back on my own sort of interpretations more so than using the ones in the guidebook, but the guidebook is actually quite nice. I do have the other deck by this creator team, the Heaven and Earth Tarot, which I like okay, but I have to say between the two, I way prefer this one more. This one feels warmer, more intimate, which seems kind of weird considering that it's a very dark and shadowy kind of a deck. The whole sort of Viking history and lore and folktale and all of that is quite brutal in a lot of ways, and that energy is definitely reflected in this deck as well. But I just find it to be, I don't know, warmer and more intimate, for better or worse, right? Sometimes that it's really kind of shadowy in your face, sort of intimate, and other times it's like, kind of soft and more joyous in a sense here, like we see with this Page of Cups. It feels more personable than the Heaven and Earth does, which feels really cold and distant to me. So this feels like it's here on Earth, sort of more material realm, and the Heaven and Earth Tarot feels like it exists outside, up above, in a more sort of spiritual realm. Like that's neither here nor there, but it just was interesting to me, having had both decks. I experienced the Heaven and Earth first, and then to come back and experience this one after that. Like it was just really cool, and I really enjoyed it. And I think the artwork is stunning too. It's stunning. I love it. But the interesting thing that I was also playing with, because I don't have anything in my collection oracle wise that I feel like matches really well and goes really well with this deck. It just, every oracle deck that I put with it just wanted absolutely nothing to do with. Here we go again, personifying my decks, but it really didn't. It was like, no, I don't want to play with that. I don't want to play with that. Stop throwing stuff at me. Like that's not who I want to talk to or talk through or talk with. And so like I tried again and again with this deck to pair it with various oracle decks, and it refused every effort except for this one. This was the only pairing that it was like, okay, fine. Like I feel like it kind of relented a little bit. Maybe I was just persistent enough that I was like, no, we are going to find an oracle for you to pair with. It's not always spot on, but one of the things that this little pairing did do for me was take a little bit of the edge off the runic tarot, because like I said, some of the cards can be a little bit hard hitting, and you get these little gentle creatures in the middle, and they do just kind of take a little bit of the edge off, which is really wonderful. It brings a little bit of softness, and I almost feel like in this sense, we're getting this sort of balance between feminine and masculine energy between these two, because the runic tarot does feel like it has a very strong masculine energy to me, and the little lonely woods creatures, when paired with the runic tarot, feels like it exists more in that softer feminine space. And so it created this really beautiful balance, and it was just so interesting the way that they paired together. So I had a lot of fun playing with these two. I did a lot of readings with using the Lonely Woods as kind of a bridge between the runic tarot and myself. So it was kind of like my portal in, and it's like, okay, gently get into this message here. And then I would look to the runic tarot and I'd pull runes, or look at the actual runes associated with each card, because they do all have runes on them. And it was just really interesting. It was a really interesting practice. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely like an unusual pairing, I think. It doesn't, I don't know, but sometimes, man, it just like, look at this. It just works. Do not hide your light. And we're here between the Four of Wands and the Two of Shields. There's just something beautiful about this pairing that just works so well. And it's the only pairing the runic tarot would have anything to do with, which is just so interesting to me. So another kind of deck pairing and decks that I worked with throughout January was the Fountain Tarot with the White Owl Mystic Arcana. I did also show these in the Playing with Pairs video as well. And since then, I've been using these two decks quite a bit for some very specific readings around projects that I'm working on and things that I'm doing in a, I don't know how to say it besides like administrative sense, like in a very practical way, right? It's not tied into creative work for me. It's more tied into the everyday sort of just getting things done kind of a work. The Fountain Tarot is one that I had before, and I rehomed because I think I even included it in a video. I was like, it's cold. I don't get anything from it. And I mentioned it in the Playing with Pairs video as well, but I think I didn't get anything out of it because I was trying to force it to be something it wasn't. And this time around, I'm kind of just accepting it for what it is, which is this really clean, clear, no nonsense kind of a tarot deck that just gives me the straight answer without any sort of emotional attachment whatsoever. So it worked really well for very mundane, very sort of, yeah, like administrative style of work, like very, very practical stuff. My only complaint with this deck really is I don't like the gilding, right? I don't like the gilding. So fine, whatever. I don't like the gilding. But I do have a hard time keeping this deck in my hand. I don't know why, but whenever I've got it in hand, like cards just want to go everywhere and they want to just fly away from me. I do have a little bit of that trouble with this deck as well, the White Owl deck. It's beautiful, and I really, really enjoy working with it. It's got a beautiful linen cardstock. It's a little slippy, but because it's small enough, like as in there's not, like it's an oracle, it's not a huge 78 card deck, I am able to keep it in my hand. My only real complaint with this deck, if I was to have one, is that I do wish there was some sort of real keyword on the deck. So for the most part, we have like titles. So we have like Mercury and Libra, Mother. Okay, that could be, you know, both a title and a keyword. But like Air, February, Moon, the Moon ones I really, really struggle with. And I do have to kind of either go completely intuitively or get into the little bitty booklet that comes with the deck. And I found that really, for the most part, I would just work intuitively off of this. It's my favorite card in the deck. Beautiful. My second favorite one is the Taurus card, which is amazing because that's my sun sign. Anyway, I really wish this did actually have keywords on it, and I may at some point write keywords on this deck because I feel like it would function as an oracle much better if it actually had some keywords on it. Like you could definitely still leave the title. I think the titles are great. But like a keyword, just something, anything to give me a jumping off point of what the bare bones meaning of the card is. So yeah, I really do enjoy working with this deck, but like I said, it is a little bit tricky sometimes. And to be perfectly honest, decks like that don't tend to stay in my collection very long, but because I love the artwork so much, I probably will hang on to this one. And I showed it in the Playing with Pairs. I think aesthetically, it just pairs beautifully with the Fountain Tarot. I think energetically, they're a fantastic match. Again, similar to the one we just looked at with the runic and the gentle creatures, I do feel like this is kind of, again, a blending, a rebalancing of the masculine and the feminine energy. The Fountain Tarot does feel like it's a little bit more into the masculine. It's pretty neutral overall, like it really, really is. But if I had to say it leaned one way or the other, because of that sort of like cool, crisp, really logical kind of energy that I got from the Fountain Tarot, I feel like it does kind of have a little bit more of that masculine undercurrent to it. And then the White Owl deck feels more in the feminine space. So I feel like we get a really good balance again, where I'm pulling both energies into a reading fairly equally, because if I'm using the oracle as kind of the focal point, then that has quite a bit of weight in itself. And then I've got the two tarot, which kind of do help balance that out. Again, I think that aesthetically they look beautiful together, but I do struggle sometimes with what maybe the oracle is trying to tell me. Although sometimes it's like, it's super apparent, right? We've got the sun and we've got this sort of emperor figure holding the sun, and both of these cards almost radiate with sun energy. So like that would definitely be something I would pull into a reading, and it works really well in that sense. It really does create a nice balance between the two kind of energies. And I felt like this is kind of the pairing that made me realize like, oh, I can work with the Fountain Tarot, right? It has something to offer me. And this allows me to also work with the White Owl, because like otherwise just existing in its own space, it really doesn't function very well as a tool because of the lack of keywords. But you pair it with something like this where there's so much clarity in the Fountain Tarot that even though the White Owl is a bit obscure, I can still pull a really cohesive message out of all of this, because I've got one really counterbalancing the other, and they just work absolutely beautiful together. So what I want to touch upon real quick and share with you is my practice planner. I have a Wonderland 222 that I purchased maybe November-ish. I can't even remember. Maybe November-ish of 2022. And then I decided, and I was going to use it for my everyday planner because that's what I had been using. And then I decided to switch to the A6, which we saw at the beginning of the video. And so I had this. And so what I decided to do was actually turn this into a practice planner. So I'll just give you a really quick flip through so you can see what I have in here. This is my cover page. This is the Dandelion, my Become. So that's my card. And this is where I'd pulled that card. And it was just to give me inspiration for a drawing. And then it like turned into like, it's my card for the year, which is really cool. In here, I am recording my I Ching studies. So I'm doing I Ching from January to March, and I've got the decks listed there that I'm going to be working with. Here I have a note that I'm going to be doing a Deacon Walk with some friends, March of this year to March of next year, and that'll be fun. And then I have my deck study list. So I'm starting with the Celtic Wisdom Tarot here. So anyway, let's take a quick flip through my January because most of this is like related to stuff that we do here on this channel, right? Talking about I Ching and tarot and all that kind of stuff. So I pulled a card for my study for the month. So every month I'm pulling a card from the, again, using the Flora Healing, and I pulled Wisteria for my focus card for January. So this relates to the practices, or really the study practices that I'm doing. So the I Ching study, the Decan Walk, the tarot study that I'm doing. So this kind of exists outside of like my normal everyday just pulling cards and doing my normal thing, my monthly medicine. simple Sunday spreads, all of that. This exists separately. And so this is my card, and I've been keeping it in my planner because it's my card for the month. Wisteria was the card that I pulled. So I did a doodle just for fun, and some stamping. And then I wrote a little message from the card itself. So that was my energy to tap into throughout the month. I also did end up noting, what I was doing this month here in terms of study. So I have I Ching. We did hexagrams of 1 through 30, and I was using Tarot of the Holy Spectrum in addition to the I Ching. So I noted that there. And then the deck I've been studying is the Celtic Wisdom Tarot. So I have that noted there. Then this is my calendar. So every day when we pull a new I Ching, I can reference this as to which one we're doing. And then this is pretty much what my study looks like. This is a card that I pulled every morning from the Into the Lonely Woods. So I just put the little key phrase up there. It was so interesting to me how there were so many days where all of this would align into this really interesting cohesive message, and several times what was going on in the I Ching and in the hexagrams would align with things going on in my real life. And I know several of us in the group experienced this, sometimes for better or sometimes for worse. But it was really interesting having it like listed out like this in this like column where I could see where I started my day, where I ended my day, and like you could see the threads coming through. Like it was a really, really interesting experience to be able to see that. So anyway, what I have in here is my Oracle card that I started my morning with. Then this is my I Ching section. And then in this section here is the card that I was pulling from the Celtic Wisdom Tarot. So I pulled a card. It's not a random card. I'm going in order. And I just wrote a little bit about that card here. And then I have reflections over here on this side, and then notes or whatever on this side. And then I have Saturday and Sunday, because we were doing the hexagram, the I Ching every single day. Those are just I Ching days. So I have that in here. What I did down at the bottom, like kind of changed. I always did a reflection of the week over on this side. And then like this one, I just printed out a little thing of the Barbara Walker I Ching, the I Ching of the Goddess. And then this one here, I started pulling, I guess I did forget to mention the Kuan Yin, the little Kuan Yin pocket oracle. I'll just like, y'all have seen it. I've showed it before. I've started pulling cards, a single card from this at the end of the week, the end of the practice, to kind of provide me with a wrap-up message. And I really enjoyed that. I'll probably keep doing that in February. So I have kind of like my reflection here, and then my wrap-up message from Kuan Yin, which again, all of this kind of really, it just ended up aligning so beautifully every single day. I really wish I hadn't like done any of the decorative stuff, because I feel like me trying to, I don't know what I was doing here. Like, this is colored pencil. I got a new colored pencil set. My husband bought it for me for Christmas. I was playing, but like it looks terrible. I should have just left it alone. And next month I'll probably just leave it alone, because like here I did it again. Why? Like, it's fine. It doesn't need to be decorative. Not everything I make needs to be pretty. So yeah. And I think that's the end. And I need to go back, and I've got here review set up so that I can kind of just reflect on how the practice went for this month. But that will be the exact same practice I'll be doing all throughout February as well, because we'll be finishing up the I Ching. I'll still be working through the Celtic Wisdom Tarot, and probably still be pulling an Oracle card in the morning. So that was really cool. So I kind of started my day with this, finished my day with this, and then I worked with other tarot and things in between. Because I've been going back and forth about print, digital, print, digital, print, digital with my tarot journal, right? Or physical digital, I guess maybe I should say. And I finally ended up back in just astrology, because like, it's just no nonsense. I feel more apt to just do what I need to do in this. I don't feel the need. Like, it's not an expensive notebook. I mean, it's in an expensive cover. Let's be honest. It's in one of my Chic Sparrow covers, but this is like a $14 notebook off of Amazon. It's not fancy. It's not expensive. I do love the paper, and I love working in it. I think that that freedom allows me to just do whatever I want to do, need to do in the moment. So I ended up creating this. I just did a little intention page for my tarot practice intention. And then I have I printed out the cover of our monthly medicine. So this is what the cover looked like. I printed it on vellum and tipped it in here, which was just fun. And I'm going to use these as my monthly breaks between the months because this is primarily my monthly medicine journal. And I'm not going to linger too long on any one thing because like there is a lot of actual personal writing in here and I haven't covered anything up, but it'll give you a sense of kind of what I'm doing this month or this year in terms of my journaling. I've got a really simple cover page with my decks that I worked with. Got that list there. Here's a simple Sunday reading, and a lot of it's just reading, writing. This begins the monthly medicine, so there was my Become card. I doodled my dandelion rather than taking a picture, and a lot of this is just writing. I had a few pens that I used, a few specific pens for specific colors, and then I was using my Canon IV. I finally invested in a Canon IV, and like it has really been a game changer. This little case set thing off of Amazon, and it came with the IV, and well, it came with a pack, and it's in its little carrying case, and then I bought some extra papers as well because these are like little 10 packs, and it's been a game changer just in the fact that like I was trying to find ways to kind of scale back on my tarot journaling just because it does take a tremendous amount of time, and I have lots of other creative projects I'm doing, like trying to make decks and write books and stuff, that like I don't want to pour so much of my creative effort into making a journal look pretty that I have none left over for like the actual things that I want to create. My tarot journal is important to me, but what's important is this. It's what I write, what I reflect on. It's not important what it looks like or the doodles or the pictures or anything like that. So having this of just being able to take a picture really quickly, print it out and stick it onto the page was amazing, because before I was basically like photocopying cards on my photocopier, which works well and honestly looks way more pretty than this does, but it also takes a lot more time, and I was trying to scale back, trying to get really focused in on what I really need to be doing. Like, where do I really need to be spending my efforts, my time, and my energy? And honestly, I'd rather put my creative energy into making decks than making a pretty journal page. The journal page just needs to be functional. And so that's what I did. I mostly just did my writing, and I used a few pictures of my spreads from my Canon IV. I did start kind of trimming them and rounding the corners because like I am still a nerd, so like that still happens. But it's mostly just, just writing. And sometimes like there's not even a ton of that. It is what it is. So anyway, this is pretty much what my tarot journal ended up looking like for January. There were other decks that I dipped in and out of throughout the month. I do have certain decks that I'm using for my Dark Mother New Moon work that I do, and for the Full Moon Divine Mother work that I do. And I'm using the same decks for that for the next 3 months. So maybe when we come to March, when I switch decks around, I'll talk about all of those then, because it's going to be the same for January, February, March. And so I'll just talk about those when I'm done, and I'll try to figure out how to show pieces and parts of my devotional journals, because I've had a lot of people ask, but it is incredibly personal information. So like that's going to take a little bit of prep and thought to be able to share that. But I'm hoping to be able to do that when I get ready for my little seasonal shift, when I move into working with other decks for those practices. So I think that's it for me today. Like that was a lot though, right? I feel like my monthly videos are getting longer and longer. And I'm like, maybe not even necessarily showing any more decks than I did previously, but like I'm talking a lot more. So apologies for that. So anyway, I would love to know what you worked with in January. I love hearing about other people's practices, the decks they worked with, the things they engaged with. I think that's always a fantastic way for us to share and to learn from each other. So I'd love to know what you worked with. So please feel free to share with me in the comments below. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shown here in the description box of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.